the engagement happens, and I'm like, I'm too much of a romantic. I don't want to be sitting on a sofa all awkward and being fed mitai, if you guys know mitai. I want to do this as my own thing. So somehow I had to like figure out when to do it, but I found a time. It was just my, person I wanted to get engaged to, and me, and I gave my now wife this poem, and you can see it ends with "Will you marry me?" I'll read it, but you can also see the other message there too. So there's no madness in this, only love. So this is that like really, really cheesy stuff here, but like as you get more and more serious about a relationship and your life and the future, I was like, this is not just play. This is for real. This is like the person I'm in love with, and I want to spend my life with her. There's no madness in this, only love. Whenever I miss you too much and talk like I've lost my mind completely, understand that life can no longer be the same for me. No longer can I think and not think of you. You who transformed my heart into a poem, opened it up and made me feel found. You who unraveled it to reveal the secrets within. Mostly you will find sweetness there, yours. All I have done is stored it, kept it there until it's ripe enough to serve as a remedy for this roving mind of mine, which longs and longs for you and only you. Yes, all this might sound like madness. Maybe it was. I'm proposing. But that's how love works, which is why everything depends on this. Will you marry me? So I'm like, I don't want to be so subtle that she doesn't I got to be a little obvious. But then I was like, I'll also do this. Just, again, playing with the power of words on a page. I mean, there's some spoken word poets. I saw some of you performing yesterday, or the video from earlier this week. I did some poetry slams here. It's kind of one of the ways I got into this. But there is something for me like what's on the page and kind of what happens between people because of words, whether they're spoken or I do visual art, so sometimes it's not even language, it's other ways of communicating. So as that was happening, as this side of my life is evolving, another question came up for me. It's like, about what things in your life, question I want you to think about what things in your life is there for you an uncomfortable and or unclear sense of mystery, avoidance, silence, shame, and fear? So one of the things for me was like love, romance, crushes, dating. We didn't talk about that. It was this assumption that you'll be a good child. I am the oldest of 5 kids, and I was a very well-behaved and well-mannered, and I got in trouble more often than I will admit to, but I tried to do the right thing. And so to admit that I liked a girl, that was a problem. That was something that would create a lot of strife or stress. And it did. Before I met my wife, I was seeing other people, and there were problems that were there. And so this is one topic. The other topic that was kind of always hovering in my life was like my father's story. So my dad immigrated to the United States in 1971, and before that he was in Hong Kong for 5 years, and before that he was in Pakistan, and before that he was in India. So he was born, no one knows the birth date. I'll tell you a little bit about the history, but 1944 is his birth date, kind of the assumed birth date. So there was the journey that he took from the Indian side of the new border. I'll tell you a little bit more about this and show maps, to the Pakistan side. Then he lost his dad when he was very young, so 12, 13, 14. I'm not sure the exact age. It was never talked about. And so I was wondered, I'm like, why is there no conversation about my grandfather? What's going on? So the avoidance of that topic was really, really like a powerful absence, silence. But it was always there, what happened to grandfather? Why is there no pictures of him? There's no one ever talks about him, and when they do, it's in whispers. And I'm like, this is weird. The other thing was my family's experiences before, during, and after the partition of 1947. So I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson quickly. And so some historical background, geography. So Pakistan, India, Bangladesh were all one British colony. Other parts, Myanmar was also part of it, and other parts of Afghanistan. So India up until, it was called India up until 1947. So the country, the area won its independence from Great Britain, and India was split up. There was East Pakistan, West Pakistan, and then India in the middle. And depending on which country you were in, it had different independence days, August 14th or August 15th. And in 1971, there was a civil war, and Bangladesh got its independence from West Pakistan, which became independent. So the splitting up was called partition. So the things that kind of go around partition, these are just some themes I thought about. Like, what is it about partition that is such a powerful force in my life? And I won't go through all of them. So this is British India, the part that you see in kind of the darker area. That was the entire region over there. And so in 1947, these were the lines that were drawn. And this became Pakistan here, Bangladesh, or East Pakistan there. And so my family was here. So they were on the east side of the border, my mom's family and my dad's family. When partition happened, the Muslims from India, most of them who were along the border, moved into Pakistan, and the Hindus and Sikhs that were on the Pakistani side, the non-Pakistani side, moved into India. The way it was presented to me as a child was this was our freedom, this was independence, this was the colonial oppressor being taken out, and life was really good after this. Like, they shouldn't have been here, we kicked them out, we have our independence, this is awesome. The more I read about it, the more I researched, the more I started hearing other people's stories, the more I realized like how absolutely violent and traumatic and like life-destroying it was. So about 10 to 15 million people migrated along this border, the one that the arrow is at. And between 1 million and 3 million people were killed. And there was major carnage. Like I'll show some pictures of some of the trains, but people get on trains, and there was just such like feeling of fear and just people feeling threatened for many reasons. And so people became refugees on the other side. So this is stuff that my family, both sides were refugees, never talked about it. They all, it was this huge, important part of my own family history that had gotten skipped over. So I'm going to just show some pictures of the migration. And so most people left on foot. My grandmother, I'll show you a picture, not of her, there's no pictures, like we have no family records, people left quickly. And you took what you could carry because there were times where your life was in danger. And whatever you had, if you were lucky enough to have a cart with some oxen, you load that up and you go. You can see people walking, you can see people, and if you're older and you can't walk, people carried you. It was, a several days, sometimes weeks long journey, depending on where you were going. It's in the desert, and so there wasn't much water. People were dying of starvation and thirst and disease. And you can see like this man on the left is carrying an older woman there. The two people on the right are carrying children. Trains were the fastest way to go, but there weren't enough trains. And so you can see people just climbing on top of the trains just to try to get into safety. And safety was a refugee camp on the other side of the border. So these are some images that really stuck out to me. And the one on the right is not a partition image, but as I was doing research on partition, it came up. And the only story that I ever knew about my dad's side of the family about partition was my grandmother saying, your dad was maybe 2, maybe 3. He couldn't walk yet, and so I had to carry him along the journey. And so this baby's younger than my dad would have been. But I just think of this woman as maybe my grandmother, kind of like my grandmother, that baby is my dad. Or, on the other side, I'm thinking of, just this one woman is carrying 2 children. And it's hundreds of miles of walking if you can do it. And plus you're getting attacked. And so I ended up writing a poem at some point about and I'm going to read the poem in a few minutes, but about my grandmother carrying it's not my grandmother, but a woman carrying her child across the border. And so when it came time to get a book cover for my book, so a lot of the poems I write about are partition related, or they're about family history. Not all of them. There's some poems in here about dogs getting lost and students doing different things in the classroom, saying they don't like poetry. I'll write about that. And so the title of the book is The Displaced Children of Displaced Children, and this became the cover. And so going back to that question, what are the things that people don't talk about or you can't talk about? Poetry, again, became a way for me to say, okay, how do I actually explore some of these things that I can't talk about with my family. It's just too, they can't talk about it. It's too painful. They don't want to talk about it, or they're not here anymore. And I can't talk to them because of that. So I'll just give you some quick images of the refugee camps. This I didn't learn about until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, about what life was like in the refugee camps. And so there's no homes. Like, people left their homes. And so over the course of a year or two, people were given homes, and then you start rebuilding your life as best as you can. And so this is the book, this is like the one of the major accomplishments for my own life. It's like I took all of these questions I had and made them into a book. And the oldest poem in the book I wrote in 2000. The book came out in 2018. So in terms of like how long sometimes these journeys take, they take a long time. So the displaced children of displaced children. So I'm going to read 2 poems from the collection, and then I'll open it up to maybe a third one. So the first poem is the second poem in the book, and the title of the book comes from this, and it's a ghazal. So a ghazal is an Arabic form. It's used a lot in Persian poetry, Arabic poetry, Urdu and Punjabi poetry. It's very common in English now too. But if you notice in the second couplet, the last word is always the same. So you'll see the word lost. And then it goes over 2 slides. At the very end of the poem, the speaker turns, like, the way ghazal works is like you're wondering about something, you're kind of looking out at the world, and like, I wonder about this, I wonder about that, I wonder about this. And at the very end, the speaker turns that lens and says, well, I wonder about myself, based on the wondering about everything else. So this is the title poem from the book. And it's about history, about not knowing history and being lost, and how do you find something that's lost. Ghazal for the diaspora. So diaspora is a community of one place as it's spread out globally. So the South Asian diaspora is all the people whose roots are there, but they live elsewhere. We have always been the displaced children of displaced children, tethered by distant rivers to abandoned lands, our blood's history lost. To temper the grief, I'm going to pause for a second. I lost my dad 5 years ago, and I was in the process of writing this book, and one of the things I did do, which I'd wanted to do for about 20 years, is ask him about his dad. And a few months before he died, I did ask, and I found out that my grandfather had been murdered, and that it was an unsolved crime, and the people that actually murdered him were like living in the town where my family was. And so there was this, he said it was the greatest tragedy of his life. And so a lot of what happened after I lost him, I had my son a few months before I lost my dad. So I became a dad, lost a dad, all within a few months. And a lot of this book was written before that, and I would say a lot was written after that. But that sense of grief, another like powerful force that writing has had in my life, comes up in this poem. So that idea to temper the grief, that's the grief I'm feeling about having lost my dad. So I'll just start at that one again. So to temper the grief, imagine your father's last breath as a Mughal garden. Marble pool at its center, the mirrored sky holding all his tribe had lost. Above the tussle of his wounded city, sad-eyed paper kites fight to stay aloft. One lucky child will be crowned the winner. Everyone else will have lost. Wish peace upon every stranger who arrives at your door, even the thief, for you never know when your last chance at redemption will be lost. In another version of the story, a steady loneliness mothers away the rust. Yet, without windows in its hull, the time traveler's supplication gets lost. Against flame-lipped testimonies of exile's erasures, the swinging of an axe. Felled banyan trees populate your nightmares, new enlightenments lost. The rim of this porcelain cup is chipped, so sip with practiced caution. Even a trace of blood will copper the flavor, the respite of tea now lost. Tell me, facile, with what new surrender can you evade deeper damnation? Whatever it is, hack away before your children too become the lost. Thank you. So much more serious than what was going on here, but that seriousness was coming from here. Like, what is it that I can't talk about? Because I don't know. Let's write a poem about it. So this is a poem called Partition and Then, and it kind of like is where the cover image I found after this poem. There's a great poet named Carolyn Forche. Oh, one thing that's very interesting is I think it was my junior year, one of my teachers recommended me to go to some local conference on writing, and I went. I think it was at Schaumburg High School. And the instructor was Andrea Mutter was her name. She's a really well-known established poet. And we had to turn in some of our work. And she's like, the one poet you must read. You need to promise me, go home and read this poet's work. You'll love it. And that poet was Naomi Shihab Nye, who's coming later on today. Like that, I've seen her read once before. I was telling Miss Enke this. She is incredible. So if you can come forth, period. When Gwendolyn Brooks came and I was here, I think I skipped my class. I can't endorse that. I don't like it. But I will never regret having seen Gwendolyn Brooks, so if you can see Miss Nye later on today, awesome. Another poet who writes these amazing poems is Carolyn Forche. So we were looking for I don't even know, we found I don't even know. There's a lot of not knowing. Partition and Then. Are we okay with time?
We have about 3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes, okay. I'm gonna skip this poem. So I'll just open it up for questions. I keep thinking 25, but it's 20. 25 is the next one. Thank you. All right, I will jump ahead. Let's get. All right, we'll go back to this guy. Questions from the audience about your writing life? Yes. I'm sorry?
How did you explain to your wife where you got the name of your original poster?
This, you know, it's funny because she and I was like putting this together last night. She goes, well, I've never seen this. And I was like, I showed it to you many years ago, but I'm too embarrassed to like leave it out. So I told her the story. You know, I told her like this is who it was, and she's like, have you ever wondered what happened? I was like, I honestly like, there were other people I kind of fell for after high school, so it happened. I was kind of I don't know what they call those people, but yeah. But she knows about it, but I don't, you know. And she knows I was a big dork back then too, which I'll take, yes. Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing, like, because I didn't know, it made me way more curious. And because I was very curious, that made me more like creative and imaginative. And so once I found out, I haven't written about him that much. I'm like, now I know. I don't need to. So now I write about more of like, I'm trying to write about what was my dad's response to that? Like, how did he react? Because I don't really know that. But that sense of like what happened. So there are times like I don't want to know, I can't know everything, and that's actually like very empowering and inspiring for me as a writer. Yes?
What inspired you to keep writing poetry?
It was what you said before, like that positive encouragement from people. Like my family was really supportive, and my friends were, my teachers at the top of that list forever and ever. And I think if you have one person in your life you can show something to, and that person's like, yes, this is great, or there's something great here, keep going. If I didn't have that, there's no way I would have kept it. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So the encouragement actually made it feel more and more and more like fun and valuable to me. I can see a little bit more. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the Writers Week. And don't tell anyone about this photo.